Hello, thank you for joining in. In today's video, we are going to learn different ways of using select function present in dplyr package. In this video, we will cover the following things. How to use the select function to keep and remove columns by name as well as position of the columns in the data. How to use operators like exclamation mark or negation symbol and minus sign to remove columns, and how to use colon operator to select range of consecutive columns. We'll also learn how to use selection helper functions like starts with, ends with, matches, etc. to select columns that have some pattern in them. So let's dive right in and start. For this video, I'll use empty cast data as an example. And for better viewing experience in the console, let's just consider head of the dataset. So as you may be aware, empty cast dataset has 32 rows and 11 columns. Since we will consider only head of the dataset, so it would have only 6 rows. So this is our dataset. Let's start with the select function and understand what it does. As the name suggests, select function is used to decide which columns are to be kept or removed from the dataset. So we can select columns by their name. So if you want to select CYL column, we can do select CYL and it will return CYL column and drop everything else. We can also select columns by their position. So since CYL column is at position 2, we can use select 2 to get the second column. To select more than one column in the dataset, pass the variable name separated by comma. Now to select column CYL along with MPG column, we can use CYL, MPG and we get both of them. The same is applicable if we are selecting columns by position. The second column is CYL and the first column is MPG. In both of these functions, notice how the order of output is determined on the order of inputs. In our original data df, if you notice, MPG is the first column, whereas CYL is the second one. Since we refer CYL first, so it comes first in the output, whereas MPG is the second column in the output. Moving on, you can also select range of consecutive columns using colon operator. You might know that colon is used to create a sequence between two numbers. So for example, 2:5 would give us a sequence from 2 to 5. Extending the same concept here, colon is used to select a range of columns. So let's say if we want to select columns from HP to AM, then we can use select statement as HP:AM. Yes, we can also write one by one using comma separated values HP, trad, WT and so on. But since we have the colon operator, it really makes it easier to select a range of columns without typing each one of them manually. The same can be applied to column positions as well. So 4:9 would give us columns 4 to 9. HP is the fourth column in DF dataset and ninth one is AM. So we get the same output here. Sometimes we need to select columns from the last. We can use ncall, which returns number of columns in the data for that. So ncall df would give us the number of columns in the dataset. Now if we want to select the last column, we use select ncall dot. So you get the carb column, which is the last column in the dataset. From dplyr 0.8.0, there is also a special function to do that. It is called as last call function. And as you might have guessed from its name, it returns the last column of the dataset. Last call function takes an offset as an input, but by default it is 0, so it returns you the last column. But if you pass the offset as 1, it would give you second to last column, which is gear here. This is our data, this is the second to last column, and if we pass offset as 1, it would return gear column. The same with ncall. If you want to do, you just subtract -1 from ncall and you get second to last column here. We can also select the columns using their types. Empty cast dataset doesn't have variation in the classes of the column. It has all the numeric values. So we have all the numeric columns in empty cast dataset. So for this part, let's take iris as an example, which has 4 numeric columns and 1 factor column. So now if you want to select all the numeric columns, which are these 4 columns, you may use the where function and pass is.numeric to it. I'll just return the head of the dataset, so we see only the 6 rows, and you see you have got all the 4 numeric columns and the factor column species has been dropped. Now let's say we want to capture only the factor column, so we use is.factor for that, and now we have output as only species column here in iris dataset. Till now we have seen that we can select columns by their name and by their position, but select statement is also flexible, that you can also combine these two approaches together to get the output. So you can also select columns by their names as well as their position in the same select statement. So let's select column 4 to 9 and MPG. So you have columns HP to AM, which is 4 to 9, and the final column is MPG. So here we have combined the two approaches of selecting column by their position as well as their name. Till now we were learning how to select columns. Let us now look into how we can exclude the columns using select statements. For this we use the minus sign or the negation symbol or the exclamation mark to do that. So to drop columns by their name, we can use minus sign name. So for example, here we'll drop MPG. Now this is the original data, and here after we drop MPG column, we don't have MPG and it has been dropped. The same is applicable using the negation symbol or exclamation mark. It gives us the same output. So MPG column is dropped. To drop it by position, we can also do -1 or negation 1. We can drop the columns by their range. So let's drop from MPG to VS. So this is the same concept as we had looked into previously. The only difference is we are using minus sign here to drop the columns. Okay, so we are dropping data from MPG to VS. So we only have 3 columns left, which is AM, gear and carb. This is what we get as output. Now if you want to drop columns by their position in range, let's drop first 4 columns. And you see the output we get is from drat to carb. The first 4 columns have been dropped. Next, we'll learn how to use pattern matching to select columns. There are tidy select helper functions that help us to do that. These are helpful to select columns that have some pattern in them. In the dataset, let's say if you want to select all the columns that start with a particular prefix. For example, here we can use C as that prefix. So all the columns that start with C. So that would be CYL and carb column. So we have a function called starts with that we can use here. And as the name suggests, it selects the column that starts with C or any prefix. So you have CYL and carb column selected. Opposite of starts with, we have function ends with. And let's select column that ends with P. So displacement and HP, both of them end with P, so these are selected. Obviously, not necessarily all the prefixes or suffixes have to be a single character. You can also add multiple characters. So if you want to select columns that end with SP, you can do that and you'll have only displacement here as an output. We'll take a couple of more functions to understand this concept better. One is contains, which looks for a particular string anywhere in the column and not necessarily at the start or at the end. So select columns that contains S anywhere. So you see now we get output as displacement, QSEC and VS column. All three contains S and they can be present anywhere in the columns. We can also use function matches, which accepts regular expression to select columns. Now regular expression or regex is very broad subject. But for us, most of the times we would need some simple regular expression to select the columns. What this regex means is the caret symbol or the raised to symbol is the start of the pattern. So we indicate that this is the start of the string and it says select a column that start with C. Dot and star means any number of characters in between and dollar indicates the end of the string. And we are looking for a pattern which ends with P. So to summarize, we are asking the select function to select columns that start with C, has any number of characters in between, and which ends with B. Carb is one such column, that's why it returns that as output in our case. I'll attach a cheat sheet for regex which you may look into to learn more about it. One interesting thing about select statement is that it will never return you duplicate columns. So even if you do select mpg, mpg twice, it would still return you only mpg column once. That is true as well when you pass column numbers to it. And if you try to fool the select statement by passing one column number and another column name, it would still return only one column. Now this behavior is different from the normal base R functionality where you can return duplicate columns. If you see, it returns mpg column twice, although it changes the column mpg to mpg.1 to keep the uniqueness of the column name. But that is not possible with select statement. It will return only each column only once. Okay, so this is all about select statement and multiple ways in which it can be used. Hope this video was helpful to you, and if you have any feedback, suggestion or comments, feel free to comment below. Thank you so much for watching.